All right, so we're back with the show. It is the year-end episode of the podcast of Buddha and the Bleep. People hate me saying that word. I don't care. It's my show. So yes, Buddha and the Slut. And I didn't have time this month because, hey, travel. Hey, Christmas. Hey, family. Jumping between continents. I am truly intercontinental, and I did not have time to do the Q&A mid-month or to write an original story. So here I am with my Libsyn account, and I've got 50 megs free. Got some space free to do a show, and it is New Year's Eve. And before I go for New Year's Eve, I hopped to Berlin, and I've come down to Prague, and I've been doing some writing and making some stuff. But of course, when I'm in Europe, when I come through Germany, when I'm in Berlin, I'm gonna visit my number one maestro bro, the subject of the episode 4, the Piano Man Cometh interview, the soundtrack you've been hearing on this podcast from the beginning, the guy who made the musical magic for my series Broken Saints, and so much else that I've worked on. I am here in P-Town, in Praha, in Prague, in the Czech Republic with Tobias Tinker on New Year's Eve across the table from me. Hello, sir.
Here I am.
Here he is. Let's raise a glass. We'll do it near the microphone. And
Oi.
Hey, that's spiked all right. And so, yeah, what we wanted to do is have a chat. We've got room for about an hour plus chat. Why not do it before we go out and
paint the town check.
Happy New Beer, get blotto, and enjoy ourselves. I wanted to crank one out, but obviously we're going to set some of this to his music, and I was thinking about it. When I came to visit this time, he was helping me with a tune, and we were also talking about another project we've been working on for some time, which we'll broach later. But this year has been an incredible year for this man's musical output, and I wanted to talk about that, not just to feature the tunes, which I will, but to kind of take a look, because I haven't been so, my output has not been so prolific this year, has not been so great, and I'm, I try to examine the reasons why, and then I look across the table, and he was just saying last night, yeah, I realized I've made a lot of music this year. So tell me about that. Tell me about, from last year, us working together and so on some private stuff, which we'll talk about later, and then going into this big creative wave. What was it like for you for this wave to come, or just how's the last couple of years been going for you?
Wow. I mean, wasn't really aware of it. It's only kind of struck me recently that I did produce a bunch of music this year, and I didn't really set out to. I've gotten involved in a few projects that took a life of their own, as it were, and that where there's a kind of flow that happens. I mean, I think for me it's always about flow state and trying to. Of course, you're always trying to create the conditions. You're always trying to optimize your conditions to make the flow state happen, but sometimes you just can't predict it. You can't really control it. It just kind of, if you get lucky, the things get out of the way, and then it happens. I've been doing. I played on a bunch of other people's records this year. That came out of the woodwork. Some contacts that I made earlier in the year where I was like, oh, would you like to contribute to these albums? And I did, and that was kind of a nice thing to do, which I haven't done that much of over the past. Aside from the collaborations with you, but I view those more as personal collaborations rather than just sort of contributing to someone else's work. And that kind of, funny way, it jump-started it a little bit to feel like, oh, hey, someone hired me to go into the studio and play on these tunes that aren't my tunes that I wrote or anything, but it felt like it unburdened me it let me kind of be creative without the usual baggage and pressure that I put myself under sometimes, to be like, okay, must release 3 albums.
Well, that's the thing. I don't see that. And you've never been the guy who's like, I have to do this. I've set this benchmark for myself. Like we talked about it more. It's like almost that preternatural ability to, when I'm interested in something, I lose myself in it, and I want to just make this thing, and I'll keep going till it's done. And what I've noticed this year, looking at the stuff that you've released, you say you're not a producer or a technician, so to speak. You're not a professional in that regard, and yet you take the reins and take the responsibility of multiple projects of saying, okay, now after our recording of the live material, I'm going to take this into the studio and going to spend months massaging it and tweaking it and throwing effects and cool things at it to master it and make it really beautiful. And this is interesting for me because I've been with you in the studio. I've listened to your finished projects, but I haven't enough times for my likings seen you perform live. And you were talking about luck earlier and how, lucky you were and circumstances allowed all this music to come out of you this year. Well, I was incredibly fortunate. The timing totally worked out that I got to be able to come back, fly in from Asia, and the next night get to see you perform live with your super cool jazz trio of Stillness, right? And Stillness, if you don't know, was really, I think, for me, it's like, I've told this story before. Like, I listened to one of his first ambient albums, Passage, which inspired me so much, and I knew it was going to. I listened to it lying down on a diving board outside of my house in North Vancouver and staring up at the stars. And it was a summer night, and I had a CD Discman back in the day, and I played the Passage CD, and I remember staring up at the stars and going, "Wow, this would be like a TV show. This would be character themes and location themes, and it's all there. I could feel I could feel kind of like the spiritual thread that was running through it, the emotional arcs within the music, geographical locations for the characters, and just for like area themes. And I felt it all. And your music has always been very evocative that way, especially the stuff that really resonates with me. And so when I heard Stillness at first, even though it wasn't just yours, but you still kind of are the emotional driver being piano. It's like percussion can drive the energy of a piece or create kind of like a steady move or motion to a piece. But really the emotional heart, I found, the emotional spine for sure of each of those pieces on the Stillness album. It's piano. It's what you're doing, and then how you master it afterwards.
It's a piano trio. It ends up being about the piano.
And it totally worked in a way where I'm like, how can I use this? Because there were certain pieces I really loved, and I'm going, I want to use this somewhere. And this seems to be a running theme for us. I'll hear music you've made and go, I need to put this in. Is this okay? And you're like, yeah, I guess so. And so with Stillness and with the Sound Fascination pieces, they just plopped right into the audiobook so perfectly, right? If you haven't heard the Cat's Maw audiobook, that's one of the things I think that we're both most proud of, because he produced and mastered the whole thing. I worked with him, but really it was a miracle worker making the sound good.
But how many times did we have that experience when we were doing that, of going, I wonder what this piece how it will line up, or how it will feel
with the...
And then we would just kind of like randomly drop the piece in, and then we would sit there and listen to it, and then just like be laughing hilariously because every beat was perfect, and the length was perfect, and the fade out happened just at the right moment.
Just as Billy was resolving his feelings, or the cat was turning to look at him, and then, innumerable times, too many times to mention, it happened. We just turned and felt fated. It felt really, really fated. And so when I started doing this podcast, when I started doing the show, I remember asking you, would it be okay to use some of your other pieces from Stillness and from Sound Fascination, the collection, to help tell these personal stories of travel and psychedelics and creativity, love, fear, spirituality, sex, whatever. And you're like, oh yeah, sure, just give me a credit here and there and make sure people know about it. But yeah, I want it to be heard.
Of course, I was going to say, of course I said, no, go make your own.
And go make your own, like, do, 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 do. And the things, I did make one or two like really cheesy pieces in GarageBand, but thank goodness for the soundtrack for the show, because so many people have written in or slid into my DMs and been like, hey, the music's one of the best things about the show. And I'm not hurt by that. I'm like, yeah, it absolutely is, especially on the storytelling episodes where I laid it in. And Stillness seemed to work really well. The Sound Fascination pieces work really well. So, but finally, it's almost like it was a weird piece of celebrity and a weird realization when it came to music, in the sense that when we know someone famous and we've seen them on TV or in films, and then finally you meet them in person, there's this kind of awe, a deeper connection to the person and the things that they've created with you because of that relationship you've built up in your own mind with the thing. this is how I felt getting a chance to see you play with your
Stillness.
trio with Stillness,
Right.
because I built up this relationship with you and Scott and Kai. Less the celebrity of the people, but more the experience of the music has become a very important thing for me.
You've probably listened to it more than anybody else,
I
except
don't
me.
think so. Well, maybe you might say that, but I think that, again, we've had a lot of listeners on the show.
Oh, that's good.
And some of the themes, I like a bit more than others, and they become recurring because they just have this great emotional space and perfect timing, 7 to 12 minutes, and it tells a great arc of a story, and I love it. And then I got to come and see the new stuff, or a chunk of the new stuff.
Well, it was the release concert.
It was the release concert
for a new album, which is called Still Waters. It's available not really anywhere, but soon, hopefully, maybe.
And that'll be, of course, when it comes to all of your stuff that we're going to be talking about today, TobiasTinker.com is the easiest way to get access to your stuff. And, of course, I couldn't believe they're handing out CDs, but they're handing out CDs. And if you still have a CD player, then you could get the CD just for the novelty of having the physical thing in your hands. But, of course, you can go to Bandcamp and a bunch of other sources.
It'll be on streaming sites soon.
And streaming sites as well. And your stuff gets a good amount of attention on streaming, too. So how would let's start with, because we are going to focus today on the new things that you've made, and also like the thought process and the emotions related to them, what have you. But so how did you did the first album, and then what brought you back together? Was it a case of timing? Was it an urge? Was it a feeling that now something's there?
Actually, yeah, it was. A long time has gone by. It's nearly 12 years.
Has it been that long?
It's over. I think it's about 12 years since the first album.
We're old.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ! And I'm lifting a beer now, and I'm rolling my eyes and recognizing the aches and pains in my body. 12 years.
Yeah. It was a fair amount of water under the bridge. We had done a 10-year reunion concert, to which I think 10 people came. That was really
one per year. That's fair.
That's good. Yeah, well spotted. Anyway, that trio is a trio that, funnily enough, we love playing together, and we have played a lot of live shows together, because that was the core of a band that I played many hundreds of shows, like hundreds and hundreds of shows. I think we counted it at one point. It was like 800 shows we'd done together or something. These circus variete shows that I've played, and that was always playing different music and rock and roll. There was a lot of the time we played rock and roll and show music, and a lot of jazz, more straight up jazz, and always with other musicians. But that trio was the nucleus of that band. So we have a lot of time under the bridge together. We've a lot of time under the bridge, water
under the bridge, and time has passed. We are both hungover today.
A little bit.
Just a little bit. It's Prague, and it's like New Year's Eve week, and the bars were all open last night, and this is a city known for its great beer.
Our brains are just a little fuzzy.
It was because we finished with the bottle of Prosecco at about 2 o'clock in the morning. All of a sudden, he just got up to the fridge. It was just like, and scene.
I guess.
So, yeah, we're both a bit fuzzy. So we'll keep telling the stories, but also throw in some humor here and there. Okay.
Some call it humor.
So
we, the bassist in that group, Scott White, is kind of, he's been between two lives for a little while. He maintains a life in Canada, and half his life and half his career is in Canada, and half his life and half his career has been in Germany. Has been going back and forth a lot over the past 10 years or so, and they had kind of, I don't know if they've entirely decided their futures yet, but they were moving back to Canada. Mm-hmm. And so we thought, well, this is an opportunity to have one last hurrah. So it was an impulse. We threw together some music, and we booked a studio. There's a wonderful studio that I've been working with a lot this year. I've been tuning pianos there a lot as well, called Folker Grave Studios, and he's got a beautiful Steinway piano, and he does these little studio concerts. It's a small room, but you can fit an audience of 25 or 30, but then you're also doing a really proper studio recording. He's got really nice mics and a really nice piano and a really acoustically treated room, and they know how to set up the mics. And it's not a full studio session in the sense of isolation. We're not properly isolated in different rooms or anything, but so there's a lot of bleed, and that makes mixing very challenging. It was a lot of work to mix, but we were able to get the flip side of that, or the trade-off, is that you get the additional focus and intensity and concentration of a live performance, which is sometimes, when you're just doing a studio session and you're in different rooms and listening to each other on headphones, it's hard to, you have to kind of recreate, or you're working with a facsimile of that concentration. You're trying to conjure up the same level of concentration, and it's a bit different. And sometimes studio recordings are a bit sterile because of that.
I think you're missing the connection of energy between the performers.
I always much prefer to be in the room together and move in the same air together, and playing acoustic instruments together is just a different experience than if you're. And we can return to that theme later when we're talking about the ambient stuff. But so had this session, and then and we had video too. We had like 8 cameras of video. So I left the studio with this basically hard drive, like 400 gigabytes of material, of like audio and video files. And then it was me that made the album from that raw material. It was like the roughs. What do they call it when you're shooting the dailies from film? Yeah. And then after that, it's basically all me. I took everything. I made sense of it. I organized it. I did some rough mixes. I did a lot of listening. I chose material. I chose takes. I did all the editing that was needed to kind of make things flow more cohesively, and structured it. And I don't think that I did the perfect job or the only great job that could have been done, but I did it, and I'm really quite proud of the result. But it took most of the year because we did that recording in February.
Well, the thing is, chances are you're listening to some in the background right now. I've been featuring a bit in episodes from this new season, from season 2, and what I noticed was that, and as you should with a musical group, with a band, as it evolves, you notice that evolution in melody and instrumentality and confidence and playfulness and experimentalism. How would you define or categorize how you guys evolved from the first album and that whole process of how you've evolved? I can make observations on what's different, but I'm curious.
Well, what's interesting is that first album, when we made the first album, we didn't know each other very well. I mean, Scott and I have known each other for 100 years. That's something else. We have
Gandalf the White.
We have a lot of time under the bridge together, but that's another story. But with Kai, he was a new entry, and the trio as a unit was a new thing. And when we made that first album, we hadn't played all these hundreds of shows together, and we hadn't had much time. We threw together these very, very basic compositions very quickly, and we recorded that. That was the first shot. It was the first. We'd hardly played together, and then this new album is, of course, at the end of these hundreds and hundreds of shows, and all this enormous amount of time playing together, and the trust that you build up, and that. Another huge theme for me in terms of collaborations. And, I can talk to you personally about this because this is something that we have between us in the collaborations. The trust that comes from a long time. Sometimes there's magic, and you have the magic. And we have a little of that magic on the first Stillness album. Mm-hmm,
for sure. You definitely do.
But the trust that has been time-tested and has built up over a long period of time. It's a relationship. It's a profound relationship. And when we're collaborating, when you and I are collaborating, or when I'm collaborating with another musician, and sometimes it's really hard to explain this to someone who doesn't live in that realm of creative collaboration.
It's funny, we both
it's
said that.
So intimate. It's such a deep level of communication that is beyond words and beyond.
We've said that about our friends and our significant others and what have you. It's a very difficult thing to convey. And it was a friend of mine actually over in Thailand who's a professional athlete, and he was basically saying it's a very similar feeling, though of course it's a different impulse. One's physical and one's creative. Mm-hmm. It's a very similar feeling to that trust that's built in a team sport where you have a language and a vocabulary that is just so mostly unspoken.
Yep.
It's so much intuition, but you also recognize consciously how the intuition is moving between you as a creative group or as a team. And when you really can all surrender to that flow together and to your innate strengths and trust has been built over time, then magic is waiting to happen.
Yeah, and you can go for something and know that someone's going to be there.
Exactly.
That's kind of neat.
Exactly. You can kick it, you can lob it, you can play it, you can sing it, and you know you're going to be supported in the process, and that someone will probably come in to help make it even better or turn it to a place you weren't expecting and bring out the best in you in the next moment.
And there's a couple of moments on the album, maybe one of which we can try and feature here, and if we take a moment, we'll spot that. There was a a moment in a full improvisation. The first track on the album there's a number of tracks on the album that are structured pieces, some more elaborate than others. Some of them are quite composed. Some of them are very springboardy, very much like kind of we start in this space and that's it, and then we go from there. And then some are flat out group improvisation, and that's something that it's not free jazz. It's not abstract, crazy. Not. It's very
and it's not snake jazz.
It's not. Snake
we just watched Rick and Morty. I had to make that joke at some point, but yeah, it's not snake jazz. And it is snake jazz, but it's not free jazz like you were saying. There is a structure to it.
Well, and it's very melodic.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Which is
part of the reason I love it so much.
Warm. There's a warmth in it, and so this first improvisation, which is the first track on the album and was the first thing that we played in the show. Just a flat out improvisation, and there's one moment when it just kind of something happens. We play this ascending. I commence this ascending riff that's moving up the scale in a kind of a modal way, and it's a really beautiful moment on piano. And if I had just done it solo, it would have been, oh, that's a nice piano moment. But because those guys were right there and they caught it and they saw where it was going, and we flow through this idea and moment together, and we end at exactly the same moment. It's like, oh, we all knew that was the point we were aiming for, and we came through, and there's the light, and it's sort of like a clouds parting moment when you're just like, oh my God, I could not possibly have planned that to be any more perfect and beautiful than it is, and it just organically happened because of trust.
And that's so deeply, deeply satisfying. And I think that for me, again, I'm always going to use the prism or the lens of storytelling. And I think that part of the reason, like we're talking about free jazz or jazz in general, and my mom makes this horrible joke. Yeah, jazz, add an extra Z on the end. Zzz, fall asleep. Jazz.
She needs snake jazz.
But free jazz is like, super cool as far as the musicality, the chops on display, the willingness to surrender and to allow things just to fall apart and find themselves and just like you become one with the instrument, and it's like something's flowing through you, and that's super cool. But there's a part of me that always craves some form of narrative, right? The arc. You know me, when we work together on musical pieces, how much I love that. And I think part of the reason I love the stillness stuff is that almost all of the songs, there are a couple where you're just having fun. And you can see that. And it's great. You get to go, okay, these guys can play. And that's cool. That's part of the jazz right? It's like we can play. We're players. And now we're going to surrender and show what our instruments can do, what we can do through our instruments. But you guys also really create these narrative spaces where I am feeling something. A feeling begins and it evolves. There's a sense of like a hint of tension or conflict and a resolution, usually bittersweet, which is why I love the first album so much, because it had that feeling in quite a lot of the songs. It was so perfect for Cat's Maw because you really feel the boy kind of going through this range of feeling over an 8-minute song or a 12-minute song, and that's not so common, I find, with jazz, a lot of jazz pieces.
Being patient. Well, one of the things about that trio was it was started with an intention, and the intention is in the name, Stillness 3. And the intention was, okay, we're 3 jazz musicians who often find ourselves playing music with a whole lot of notes in it. We play, that's part of the thing with jazz, and it's maybe one of the things that your mother is responding to. Sometimes it's pretty notey. There's just like, there's a lot of, I'm going to see how many notes I can, see how clever I am and how dexterous I am.
And we wanted to take noodling. Let's all noodle.
It can be a lot. It can be. At its best, it transcends that.
Yes, of course. That's the whole idea.
At its worst, it's all that.
Everything self-indulgent was just technique. It's like we're both in different aspects of it. We're both pretty appreciative of prog rock. Yeah. And, but you want a noodle genre.
Yeah, totally.
Like, look at me, what I can do with my guitar. Look at me, what I can do on this. So there's a fellow who's probably listening to this podcast right now, Nathan Frost. Nathan,
hi, Nathan.
You incredible prodigy, you brilliant human being, you example of the superior species that will take over the earth soon. But he'll be the first to say it's that challenge of getting out of your head, especially when you're playing prog and you really just want to look what I can do, and the math of this is brilliant. This piece I'm making that's mathematically awesome. I'm like, yeah, but I want to fucking feel something. Yeah.
Well, the idea of Stillness was to take 3 people with all that technique and all that background and that who can operate in that world. And not that I'm the greatest jazz player ever or anything. I'm just like, but I can hold my own in a jazz gig. But we wanted to take those 3 people and say, what if we played a lot less notes with a lot more intention and sank more into the sounds that we can make with the instruments without having to be clever. There's not that much. It's one of the things I'm proudest about about these albums is that they're not very clever.
No,
they're
it's
much
very
more feeling. They're much more emotional, and the landscape is more emotional than intellectual. And
then you could feel that.
At the end of the day, that's kind of my jam. That's kind of where I excel and where I am happiest and where I feel like I'm doing something that's worthwhile. Because if you set out down this road of cleverness, of look how clever and dexterous I am.
The Fight Club joke. How's that working out for you?
There are so many people that I could rattle off names of people operating the jazz sphere who are way clever and way more dexterous than it. They have way more chops. They have way more vocabulary, way more deeper harmonic knowledge. I'm not that guy. I like jazz, and I there's things that I like about it, but there's stuff that I can do. And the stuff that I'm more confident about as a musician, as an artist, as a composer. Yeah, that's not where I excel. That's not my home. My home turf is emotional narrative, and
here is, and we're gonna have we're gonna cross the streams a little bit. We might veer back into one and slowly push forward the other, but as opposed to like going, okay, and now we're gonna stop there and move on to this. But I can't help but want to bring in a little bit now. Mm-hmm. So you have that jazz side, you have your jazz trio, you have something that is based on we are real musicians who have such a comfort level with ourselves that we can now kind of surrender a bit of the look how good I am and just play something really cool that is kind of narrative based or at least emotional and you feel something. And has a certain kind of quality, and again, it's like tangible, tactile, physical, acoustic instruments. And you take that, and you go, oh, Tobias is good at that. Wonderful. And then, guess what else you're good at? And I go to the other side. Now, most of you probably haven't heard about this new project he's been working on. I want to get into the nitty-gritty of it. We're going to I'll probably find a way to ease in a little piece of it here to have it support for the rest of the show. But I am a huge fan of soundtrack. I'm not saying he is making soundtrack material. I would try to use it as soundtrack material in a selfish way. But I am really moved by... I remember having a fight with a guy in university where it's like, soundtrack music can't stand on its own. Absolutely not. It has to be married to the visual. Otherwise, it's just worthless. It's just there to support. And I'm like, no. And I was almost ready to physically fight him. And he was scared of me at the time. It's a bit
silly.
Well, was it? He admitted years later, I was so wrong, Brooke. Why'd you even listen to me? but
and you're like, I didn't.
I didn't. But at the time, of course, I had been so limited in my exposure to the big guns, right? The John Williams, the Danny Elfmans, whatever else. And then, of course, as I watch more films and more TV shows, and music and TV had been so minimal and lacking such importance until Twin Peaks and Angela Badalamenti really said, the soundtrack, the TV network, ABC at the time was blown away by how well the soundtrack sold. It was a big deal. Yeah. And you saw more prestige TV and HBO shows and whatever, in this golden age of television, doing amazing soundtracks. And the narrative of the music having a life of its own that was supporting or it's sometimes running at odds with the material to create cognitive dissonance, attention, what have you. If you haven't had a chance, please go to my website, to brookburgess.com, and you can check out my top 10 TV shows of 2019. And the reason I bring that up, not just for clicks, but the reason I bring it up is that one of the things that stood out to me more than anything else this year, maybe it's where I'm at emotionally, or maybe it's just something that I need more than just the same old story, no matter how well it's acted, or the same old archetypal kind of journey, the hero's journey. And it was audio that was leaping out at me, and specifically soundtracks this year really leaping out at me. And if you take a look, and I don't know all the composers, and I apologize, but we can look them up. You guys can look them up, but I guarantee if you listen to clips, you'll understand what I'm talking about. If you take a look at The Expanse, and Season 4 was great. If you take a look at the incredible soundtrack from Mr. Robot throughout all 4 of its seasons, and how Sam had it evolve from these early, dun, 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 dun,
it was quite minimal.
It was minimal, and then it kind of grew and evolved, and then there were moments that were just purely piano-driven, and moments that were synth, based upon how humanist we wanted the character to relate to us with. And then you got Trent Reznor, who's incredible with Atticus Finch, and who did what I still consider to be one of the best movie soundtracks of the last 15 years, the Social Network soundtrack. And he did Watchmen on HBO. Amazing. Succession's piano soundtrack, when you get further into the show, it's like they develop character themes that are really nice with like strings and with piano, and it really feels like you can feel the wealth and you can feel the sense of history in the soundtrack. And I'm moved by that stuff. There are only a few films this year that got me. I brought up The Lighthouse, how much I loved it and how it was a nod back to, it was a throwback to like Eraserhead, David Lynch. The sound design itself became almost like a soundtrack, but there was still this low drone of menace running through the thing. I love pieces that aren't trying to hit you over the head with, time to feel this now. Yes. You must be sad now.
Well, that's the
and
worst.
Now you triumph. No, but if you can create a space for me to fall into, and suddenly I realized, ooh, I've popped through a hole in reality. I'm being held in this space. I'm on the event horizon of a black hole because of the gravity of this music and the performances and the visuals. It's why I told you to watch Mandy.
Yeah,
right. Which he went up to the countryside, indulged a little bit, and enjoyed that. And there's the thing; it's not the best soundtrack in the world. It's good, but really
it's perfect
appropriate
in the
context with what Panos was doing with the psychedelic visuals and Nick Cage's madman performance. When it works, it works. And I say all this with all this excitement because I love getting excited about his new stuff when it's something that really resonates with me. And it's been a while since you've kind of gone to this type of space. In fact, I'm not sure you've ever really gone to this type of space.
No, this has been a surrender into a different place.
And it's exciting me. It's already inspiring visuals in my mind, which means, oh shit, I'm probably going to end up making something new because he inspired Saints of Passage. And so talk to me about Owl Cave Dreams. And yeah, that's almost a Twin Peaks reference in there too, Owl Cave thing. But it's not consciously, but I can't help but say
semi-conscious.
And what's
subconscious.
Well, I will say that what's interesting from what you told me, and I want you to expand upon it, I know I'm babbling, but I'm excited, is that you talked about with Stillness having these three incredibly capable older musicians who like really, they had their chops, and you were kind of going, okay, we know we can do the math, we know we can work the instrument, now let's surrender and make some stuff.
Yeah.
And now you're working with someone who doesn't necessarily have that level of chops.
Oh.
They're good, but at the same time, it's like not like, it's more about getting to the emotional state from what you've shared. Or please tell me if I'm wrong. I want to know.
No, Chalice is a very capable guitarist. Has made most of their living as a circus performer.
Right. Though that's what I mean.
But they've made music for a very long time.
You can make music for a long time, but it's not about like here's the thing. It's like when you're in the kind of the jazz world or the classical world, there's a certain kind of weight attached to I am this type of musician.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
There's pressure to attain a certain.
So he's a self-taught guitarist.
Oh no, some has some schooling, some background in music. I mean, his official schooling was is in psychology, but brilliant person. Anyway, this is a duo project. I think that should be clear.
Yeah.
By this point, and it's an ambient duo project, and
psychedelic
ambient is what we're kind of billing it as.
I had to blow that wad because that's really fucking cool.
That's our micro niche, our genre that we are aiming to dominate. We want to be the new Tangerine Dream. That's I think the goal.
That's pretty cool. And what was the other one you were bringing up too? Well, it's you were making some references to a few things,
like John Hassel a little bit.
Yeah, or there's a hint of Boards of Canada in places.
Yeah.
There were moments in one of the first albums he was playing for me. If any of you are fans of Explosions in the Sky, before it gets thunderous and brings in drums, they usually have these moments that just feel like you're in empty fields that go on forever, and it's kind of like you're hovering over them, and it's texture and it's synth and it's guitar, and it just holds you there with these notes before it plunges you into like the thunder of the Friday Night Lights football sort of thing. There are some really, really great moments that felt like it was on par with that, or even like early Godspeed You Black Emperor before the drums.
A little bit with the darkness that's there. So we're exploring. This is a very a nascent kind of project. It's not. We've only been, poking away at it for a few months now, but we have about 4 or 5 albums worth of material.
It's insane how much you have.
We haven't released it all yet, and it'll be dripping out in the coming months.
2020.
Yeah. This is the year, I think, for sure. But it's an ambient duo, and it consists of two musicians, one of which is my friend Chalice, and who's a very old friend, who I've known for many years, but have never really. I mean, I played on an old album, but I we haven't explored this level of collaboration ever before, and now we are, and it's a very different project than Stillness because it's all about texture. Really, this is music where the structure of it is, it's not. I mean, yeah, sometimes we're playing harmonically or playing a drone, or sometimes it's tonal, sometimes it's really atonal, sometimes it's really purely textural. And
to simplify for us dumb folks, basically it's him and the guitar with guitar pedals and effects, and you with a keyboard. So the guitar, he's the digital person and I'm wrong. Start again. I'm the digital person. Chalice is the ambient person, and what? My brain is. You're both really playing. He's playing guitar through pedals. You're playing the keyboard with the digital keyboard.
I'm the digital guy. I have a laptop, and Chalice has a guitar and a table-sized tray of effects. So it's all analog. His world is analog and analog signal flow and controlling his everything's real, knobs and switches, and I'm operating a laptop, so my world is entirely digital. And we sit in a room, and Chalice has these incredible giant monitor speakers, these Genelec 1020As or something, I don't know exactly, 1030s. They're
music nerds, come on in.
But they're phenomenal sounding. They just move so much air in the room that it sounds incredible when we're in the room. It's really a joy to do, and we improvise with sound and texture.
You don't talk ahead of time like, we're kind of feeling this, or you want to set a mood, or let's light a candle or some incense,
or spark a joint
or something.
At the moment we're struggling. Well, actually, no. Funnily enough, it's very. It's not the most moody. We don't tend to do that. It's pretty much.
Try it sometime.
Yeah. Well, we work. Chalice is a family, and they are gone during the day, so we have daylight hours to work with, and we like to play.
You pull the curtains in the room. Yeah. You spark a joint and some incense. You do some candles, and you get going.
Yeah, it could go that way.
Well, it's amazing. I'm sure you're hearing some of it right now. It's amazing what you've done by not setting the mood. Yeah. Like, whatever gets you there, whatever. I don't fucking care. But what I'm interested in, I think more so than even just like the specifics of like, what's your tech, and I want you to tell me how a session goes. But what I want to know before I forget to ask is, how did the idea come up? Like, you've had this long relationship. You've known this person for a long time.
We've been talking about doing an ambient project together for a long, long time. And we always sort of thought that it would be like, okay, I know that he makes these sounds in his little world. And I've, of course, been experimenting with ambient music for a long time, and some of which you've used, the Sound Fascination stuff that you've used in this podcast and in the Cat's Maw. I've been playing around with what I used to call melodic ambient, and for a good long time, and we sort of thought for years that the way that would be that I would create some tracks and send them over, and then Chalice would add something to it, or vice versa. But we never really talked about the idea of actually getting in a room and doing it live. We'd just been talking about it for so many years that finally we decided, okay, well, let's listen. This is not going to happen unless we commit to a date, and so we put it in the calendar that I would go over, and I had my new little handy dandy, very portable rig,
right?
And we just sort of set up, and we said, well, let's just see what happens. Let's see what sounds happen. Let's see what we want to do with it. And what happened was this kind of several hours of intense ambient, like improvised flow, that I can just capture as we're doing it. I just capture it all live directly into the laptop as we go, on however many tracks that ends up being. Usually it's one stereo track for me, one stereo track for Chalice, one stereo track for my effects, and that's kind of it. That's all I'm capturing. And then there's a lot of looper pedals involved. There's a lot of looping involved. There's a lot of the other thing that we do is my signal goes out to his board,
right?
And Chalice's signal comes back into my rig, so we can capture at any given moment. I can stop playing and just choose to apply effects to what Chalice is doing, or vice versa. So there's one piano track that was one experiment, and these are all just kind of like experiments with recipes where there's no rules, but we say, what if we did this? What if I just play piano and you just take that signal and apply live effects to it. So there's a track that's just that, and then we might do the vice versa. So that kind of adds a little bit of complexity to and cross pollination to it. But like the stillness thing, it's a lot of it is about trust and surrender to the moment, and and confidence in terms of saying, well, I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm feeling like this sound is going to work somehow. So and half the time we're in the room and we lose track of who's doing what. Like we're going through the same monitoring system, and it's quite loud and lush, but it's hard to keep track often of what sound I'm making and what sound Chalice is making.
You want to lose yourself, I think, a little bit in what you're doing and who's making what, and then be surprised by it. And that's something you taught me a long time ago when it comes to the creative process of like giving yourself the space and allowing yourself to let go of control so you can be surprised in what comes, as opposed to having to control and pre-plan whatever else. And that's what's so amazing about both of these projects is the sense of discovery you've shared with me, and what you can hear it in the music as well, I think.
That's what excites me. That's what interests me. I don't know. I'm not the kind of musician who sort of gets really good at one thing and then just does that thing. I'm never been that guy. I'm always, I don't know, to a fault probably, trying to discover something new and
that was something from our first talk, weird. Though. That was from our first talk. Like, you had an adventurous spirit, whether it was with music, whether it was exploring the world, whether it was psychedelics, whether it just travel in general, whatever it may be. You remind me of myself in this way. Part of the reason that we get along so well, I don't just do one thing and focus on that. I feel like it's for myself, and I think you're basically expressing the same thing. It can feel like a prison. It's like, okay, I admire, like Jiro Dreams of Sushi. I admire the guy who spent his entire life mastering the perfect wad of rice and slicing the perfect piece of salmon and becoming a complete master of their craft. I would want to stab myself with a rusty nail, or again, dig out my eyes with a dull grapefruit spoon. Yeah, it's just I could just do one thing and one thing only. This world is near infinite in possibility, and I'm not trying to say that let's be a Pokemon and catch them all. We've had that conversation before too. But it's impossible because but you find your wheelhouse, but you want to have like room to maneuver within it, and also see, hey, this skill I developed in music could maybe apply to writing because you were a good writer, could maybe apply to something else. Hey, you bake bread, you know, coffee. We had that talk before too. Your ability to focus and to learn and to be genuinely interested in the surprises that pop up, and to just be open to experience. And we were talking about this afternoon and a little bit yesterday too, and definitely in the last talk, but it's important to bring it back up again. And I mentioned this to you last night, so I'm sorry I'm going a long ways around to get back to here, and we'll get back to the music for sure. But I had shared with my friend Crystal, the lead singer, the duet, actually not lead singer, but the co-singer of Sons and Daughters, the video that had been going around about the motivational speaker, the woman who was just talking about, here's what I wish for you for Christmas and for 2020. I wish failure for you. And her speech was riveting, and it sounds like it could be a cheesy TED Talk, but it wasn't. There was something even more. There was something powerful in it because you could see how much she believed it. She's like, the only way you'll improve is constant failure. The only way you'll grow is by throwing yourself at the ground and then getting back up. There's that meme floating around where, hey, Picasso made 50,000 pieces of art approximately, from little sketches to full-blown paintings and whatever else. And only 100 of those are revered, recognized, and will be remembered. What's the moral of that story? Yeah. And it's, you know, and we're talking about how prolific you are right now and how much content you've made. And there are many times you've confided in me, oh, I've made so much. And, you know, maybe somebody someday can make some money off of it, or someone will appreciate it, or maybe more than you will like it. But I think that you are proving that right. You're willing to risk and willing to fail and never daunted by the process of, oh shit, I've tried 15 loaves of bread and they're all sucking in different ways right now. If that were me and has been me, I'd be like, well, I'm not fucking making bread anymore. I'm going to go buy some bread from someone who can do it well. Let's go down the block to Le Caveau and get a really nice baguette because I can't make bread that good. But you're like, no, I'm going to try it again and get my bread to be great.
It wasn't always. I remember a long time ago when I lived in Victoria still, and I've been drawn to bread making for ages, and I was trying, and I tried to make these 2 loaves of bread, and they were just catastrophic failures. They were really they just collapsed in on themselves. When you looked at them, they were barely recognizable as even attempts at loaves of bread, and I'd taken them out of the oven, and they were cooling on the drying rack, and so a friend arrived and said, "Oh, wow, what happened here?" And for some reason, I didn't even plan this; it just came out of my mouth, and I said, "Yeah, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are bread."
It's funny time, folks. We are with Tobias Tinker of a
They were so dead. They turned into their own coffins.
But the thing is, that doesn't get you down. It doesn't depress you. You're just like, I'm going to try again. I think, and that comes from something you had said before and something you were talking about this afternoon, but definitely in the first podcast, how you were just really supported in your creative adventures and endeavors and in just expressing yourself in this way. I was kind of raised more in an environment to be afraid of making mistakes.
That's the luckily you trained yourself out of it.
It's still hard. I was saying to a friend the other week, a good guy. Hey, Dave French. Nice to. Hope you're listening. And he's like, man, I can't even imagine what it would be like as a creative guy, as a musician, to be crippled by fear. He goes, Brooke, you should give lectures or talks on how to overcome that shit. And I'm like, I don't. I try. But when people go, hey, where's the next book, or where's the next movie script, or where's the next thing? You should be making more. Yeah, life gets in the way. I've got personal stuff. I've got money to make. I've got all these different things. But also, there are a lot of times where I'm like, I'd like to, but I'm sure it won't be good enough, so I won't try. I would hate... I might want to try something that would be an absolutely spectacular failure. And I think I've had a few of those.
That's the dare to suck philosophy.
Yeah, the dare to totally suck. That's okay for me because, again, I look at stuff like some of my heroes have done, like Lynch or Gilliam or what have you, and comic book guys, the Alan Moores, the Neil Gaimans, the Grant Morrisons, and sometimes they'll be so daring, they'll swing so hard for the fences, and they'll whiff it, and it won't be great at all. But it's almost like, wow, there was a real vision in there somewhere, and there was real heart in it and effort. I'm so terrified of releasing something that I am not fully committed to in my cells to make great, even if I fuck it up, right? Like, I want to go for the A or the F. I want to do the Lynchian sort of thing where you're going to fucking love it, or you're just going to be like, get that away from me. But I don't. I question myself every day, and I worry that, do I have enough skills to get it past B or B plus in some of the things? It's one of the reasons we talked about, when we're making music together. Why I said I never became a musician, even though I might have a pretty good ear for songwriting and have some capabilities in that regard. I'm like, well, but will the songs I make, even if they're catchy or nice, would ever be better than B plus? And
only if you do it a lot.
Maybe, but I think there are lots of people out there who make a lot of content and it's average.
Yeah, but
and the world has enough noise, and I want signal, baby.
But you don't get signal without noise, without creating some noise. You don't get A without making a whole bunch of B.
Yeah.
And that's part of exactly what we're talking about. It's part of daring to suck. It's part of the courage to fail. Part of realizing that mistakes are the only way we ever learn anything, and failure is the only way we ever grow. And being afraid of mistakes and failures is being afraid of learning and growing.
Well, I think the thing for me is that it's, the tree falling in the forest, and does anyone hear it? It's like, if no one listens to it, that's part of the failure, or reads the thing, or whatever else. That's kind of a failure, but at the same time, no one's judging it because no one's listening to it, so it's not really a failure. You failed in connecting, but they couldn't find it because it's so easy to get lost in this tsunami of noise, of content in this digital age. But now what we have happening, and this can kind of send our conversation on a tangent, hopefully with some cool music in the background to do so. But now what's happening is that the audience is so fragmented. Like, it's really, like, every major media company and all the indies, too, are talking about it's all about narrow and deep, right? It's not about, you're not going to get, most people can't do the Avengers. Disney can do broad 4-quadrant, right? Warner Brothers, in some cases, can do 4-quadrant. Taylor Swift is 4-quadrant. Like, you have these 4-quadrant things that can appeal to everyone or a global audience, but the really memorable things, the things that get the crazy, fervent fan bases, the Rick and Morty fans, the Mr. Robot fans, the Watchmen fans, for music, the really cool bands, we could all name there, but like something super cool, you're like, this is mine. To reach those types, it's like, it's split between so many different kind of audience types. It's like, well, I want to make stuff that can appeal to people who are young, but also people who are maybe older and have a perspective on things, who are of, girls, who are boys, who are different sexual orientations, different geographical positions. But we're kind of moving into this time with all the digital content on the web and having access to everything that's happening in the world and a visibility on the world kind of being flushed down the toilet and the rocketing down the shitter. It's fractured so much, and I'm making a clumsy segue to the fact that I couldn't help but notice this year, we are in this unique position based upon our age range, our generational range, right? We are tried and true, dyed-in-the-wool Gen X, to quote Douglas Copeland, and one of our contemporaries. And as Gen X, we're like, I think, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, that we are the first generation to like make less than our parents make. I think we were the first one after our parents' generation to potentially make less, and most of us have.
I sure have.
Yeah, I definitely have. To just see like really like less rewards, to have a less sense of satisfaction, to be alive, to be part of the American dream or the Western civilization, to have more depression, less friends, all these things, right?
But at the same time, we haven't been utterly shafted by the world. No. There's an echo of our parents' prosperity that I can't pretend that I've had that I'm poor.
Yeah, but we're equipped to see the meaninglessness of it. We are the first generation to really go, this is bullshit. Yeah. So it made us.
We didn't screw up the world, and we're not the ones who have been worst screwed by it.
And we're not the ones necessarily going to save it. What we are as artists, as we're observers, we're witnesses, we're the documenters, we're the ones who express the feeling about how fuck things were and how we're not going to buy into it.
The tagline for my website is thoughtful music for troubled times, and that's. Maybe that's why I had a prolific year, because these are troubled times.
I think so. And then,
there's a lot to observe.
But we sit there. I think that and we make a lot of jokes about it. We can pretend to be serious. And I know that when I was younger, everything was so serious. And now it's kind of, the older you get, hey kids out there listening, the older you get, the more absurd this whole fucking ride becomes. It really is a joke. And you sit back, and especially from our generation, we sit back and we observe the madness going on around us, and you can't help but kind of like roll your eyes. And we're not blinded to it. We're not the dog in the cartoon sitting there in the fire going, "It's fine, it's fine, it's fine." We're not doing that thing, but we are kind of like, look at this year in OK Boomer, right? Yeah. Yes, we know our parents, the Boomers, just set up a system that was meant to self-destruct. That they chewed everything up and made life all about acquiring goods and getting money and self and status and being important, and it fucked us. But we kind of kept this, I guess, rebellious nature like teens with our folks. Fuck off, mom and dad. But like, we didn't start a tribal war with them. And there wasn't that much distance between us and them. We just had a bit more wisdom from perspective and just our natural rebellion between generations. But millennials versus boomers right now, an absolute inability to see each other's perspective from a generational standpoint.
A total unwillingness to try to see each other's perspective from what I can see.
And that's the problem with tribalism everywhere,
right? And I mean, like every other kind of tribalism, it's frustrating because I'm sort of like some of the coolest, most progressive people that I know in the whole world happen to be baby boomers, and conversely, not so much. And some, and similarly with millennials, there's no one. it's an accident of birth. When you are born is as accidental and random as as where you were born. Did I say that right? When and where? Anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah.
I just find it a little bit. If you don't want to be painted into a box, if you don't want people to make sweeping judgments about you based on your generation, well, don't make sweeping judgments about other people's generations.
But people can't help to do that with generations right now. They can't help to do that with like the battle of the sexes. They can't help to do that with like, cultural superiority, one culture versus another, religion, one versus another.
Why can't we help that?
Well,
we should.
Well, I think that we're the last generation to kind of see how fucking useless that is. That, yeah, we're afraid for the future, but we also know we're going to die before the worst of it happens. Probably. And so we're kind of sitting back and it's like we're seeing this horrible dark concert, as a music metaphor, horrible dark concert playing out before us. And we're sitting back and the back rows are up in the cheap seats and we're lighting the lighter and kind of waving our hand back and forth because we see what's going. We're like, yeah, nice work, love this song, this is great. It's all falling to shit. See you there. It's a Pink Floyd concert. Like this is it's what we're living in is madness. But we kind of go, well, not much more to endure. We're going to punch the clock soon anyway. We can feel bad for the kids that are coming. We can feel bad for our parents who don't understand why there's so much anger out there. They just don't get it. But of course, everyone's angry. This is why the tribalism's happening. Because as we said last night, and what I loved about the ending of Mr. Robot, without giving too much away, is that those princes of power and air, the masters of the universe, the 1% of the 1%, have us fighting with each other as they sit and enjoy the spoils of us as their slaves. If you think it's anything else, you're a fool.
People are tragically easy to manipulate, and that we've been manipulated to blame each other for stuff that has been done to us.
Of course.
And we should be getting together and changing it, but instead we're blaming each other and fighting each other.
Well, it's funny because
so maddening and
from the 80s into about 2000, after the financial crash, I think up until that point, like from the 80s to then, they were really playing up the whole bread and circuses thing. It's like, okay, we're going to give you lots of entertainment, schlock entertainment, and we're going to give you cheap garbage food and distractions and pop stuff, and you'll love it, and that's fun. I know you want another beer. I'm going to get you. You can act cool, but I know you want a beer. I'll get it in a second.
A little bit, though.
I'll get another one in the fridge. I'll get it in a second. But that's not working anymore because people are so poor. They're so under the thumb of it. They feel so oppressed, and they don't see any hope or any way out. That tossing them another cheaper pizza that gets to your house in 20 minutes, or another cool sex pot releasing an album, and hi, look at me, here's a close up of my vulva, love you, bye, peace.
This is why we ramp up the pace and just keep.
So instead, it's like, oh shit,
frenetic pace of throwing stuff at us.
We can't give them dopamine. We can't soothe them from their anger. All right, well, we just need to redirect their anger then, and not at us. Because if we were smart, we would take all that anger and do a total run on the banks and tear the walls of things down and hold up our middle fingers and bash the riot police and then stop shopping. Because if 10% of us stop shopping for 10 days, that's the Adbusters thing. It would make an economic system of a country collapse. So you really want to make a statement, just stop buying shit for a while. Instead of these fucking Twitter wars and cancel culture and SJW and hyper-fascism on one side and angry liberalism on the other, and it's just too much. Like, we're not being old, we're not being crotchety old men here. We're sitting back as this generation, and our female friends too, and just kind of going, this is madness. You're trying to brawl it out in a pit. You aren't speaking the same language, and you're missing the point that we're all being laughed at because we've all been played for suckers. And this brings us back to troubled music and troubled times.
Yeah, I was going to say. I'm just making the soundtrack for this.
I'm just making the soundtrack for this.
I can't change it. I can't fix the world, so I'm just making the soundtrack.
What's the feeling? Speaking of, it's like, we can get into this a little bit too before we get into some fun stuff to finish off. Like, what's the feeling in Berlin? You live in Berlin. You live in Germany. You live in
but I'm kind of a hermit.
You hermit too, but you must talk to your friends. You're in like the economic engine, but at the same time, there's a lot of tension, like the immigration situation, the political situation, the move to hard right through so many nations throughout. We had talked about this a few years back.
That's definitely happening,
but it's more so now. Like, we're in Prague right now, and I've met people and friends who are kind of like, so I've heard it can be kind of tints here of a certain skin color, like it's very much it's
I
not
mean,
horrible
to a significant extent, the big population centers, the big capitals like Berlin and Prague are always going to be insulated from that. There's a higher percentage.
To a degree, Budapest isn't.
Yeah, no,
Moscow
that's true.
isn't.
That's true. I don't know about Moscow, but Budapest certainly. I mean, Berlin is still one of the liberal bastions in the country. For sure.
It's where the hipsters live, running down the streets. We met some guys from Frankfurt last night, and they're like, "Oh wow, Berlin, Charlottenburg, you live the hippest life." And it's like, no, it's a bunch of baby boomers and old Russians.
There's a lot of gentrification happening in Berlin, in certain areas of Berlin. My friend Chalice, I think it was him. Someone was told me. I think it was Chalice that told me they saw someone with a red baseball cap on the street in Berlin the other day that said, "Make Berlin shit again." That I thought was just excellent.
That's hilarious. So people can afford to actually live there. Because when you first went there 20 years ago, plus...
It was very cheap. And I started coming to Prague 20 years ago, and it was ridiculously cheap. And both places have become quite a lot more expensive. I mean, Berlin is still remarkable. You can still have a remarkably good value lifestyle in the sense of the quality of life for the cost of living index is still very good in Berlin compared to virtually anywhere else in Western Europe, to be honest. And Prague has become probably one of the most expensive places in Eastern Europe, but it's still compared to Western Europe. It's still relative,
it's not bad.
If you think it's expensive here, go to Munich.
Oh. I mean, yeah, a cup of coffee and $15 Canadian, please.
And if you think that's expensive, go to Scandinavia.
Yeah, holy moly! It's weird to see the way the world's going, and it makes us long. I think it makes us long for simpler times. It makes us long for not being old, going, I miss penny candy and I miss hockey cards.
Okay, boomer.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, boomer. But I think that, and this is segue to kind of like closing things off with a little bit of a tease, because we've seen what you've made over the last year. But what this really is about for me, that's a chance for you to promote your music and talk about your process. But we can get stuck in the head stuff. But as I mentioned to you last night, it's like for me, it's about connection. It's why I do the show. It's why I write what I write. It's why I travel. It's why I have the bonds that I have and the small circle of very close friends that I do have. And with you, there's this incredible connection of creative respect and warmth and friendship, camaraderie, shared generation, shared understanding of the world, kind of a lot of shared values, even though we're different. And but there's also history. We're talking about that. This is actually pretty good full circle because you were talking about that with your band and the history that you had in Stillness with the people you work with.
Yeah, and with Chalice as well in the Alcade Dream. So I was going to say connection is why I'm happy to be making a lot of collaborative music right now. And I think one of the reasons that I feel I had a year where I produced a bunch of music was because I've done a lot of collaboration, and that keeps me more fueled. There's only so excited I can get sitting, making quirky sounds in my studio by myself. It can be interesting. It can be fun. I can produce sometimes things that I'm happy with. I've done a lot of solo piano records that I'm very happy with. There, I feel like it's much more. I usually do them as we've talked about in the past in a concert setting with an audience, because then there's connection and energy exchange, and there's that heightened focus of the concert setting. And so even if it's a solo project, there's connection. But for me, I get more excited, and there's more tension and more interest in the music that when it comes from that from connection between people and between artists, and particularly between artists that come from different places,
different backgrounds. That works, and then you have again our thing where it's like, okay, I like telling stories. I'm a narrative guy, but at the same time, like you said, it's hard to be kind of hermited up and to feel the same level of excitement and enthusiasm sometimes. And I every year, this is New Year's Eve, and every year people say, Brooke, what are your resolutions or what are your hopes for the year to follow? And every year for the last 6-7 years, maybe even longer, one of my things I would list out in my hopes for the following year or the year to come would be a chance for, a fun, rewarding, creative collaboration, because when you get into that zone with somebody where you can bring your differences together and make something more than, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? Mm-hmm. It's so deeply satisfying And so when you take that, the potential for collaboration, I've collaborated a lot, and some of them haven't been satisfying collaborations. But when you collaborate with someone that you genuinely like, that you can bring different things to the table and bring out the best in the other person. When you have a shorthand that's proven over time, when you have like that deep connection, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and it allows you to create something great because of that. And you have the added factor, and I'm bringing this one and tossing this on the table, but you have this added factor of nostalgia because you have all of those memories, and it's not just about trust, but it's about shared emotional experiences. And also the generational thing we brought up about the whole where we come from and why we are Gen X and what does that mean to us. And that's my segue into a fun little thing that we'll leave you a taste of. It's something we were working on a while back.
Work in progress.
Work in progress. But we were sitting at a I don't know, we were sitting at like a little beer garden / or just a restaurant somewhere in Berlin, and talking about how hard it is to get original stuff made and how people really need to have that attachment to a known IP, and we were wondering why, and it's
the safety
of it, the proven quality. People will buy this, but more importantly, what we're seeing now in this age of simulation, recycling, rebooting. Like, people are just desperate to. I think nostalgia is stoked. The embers and the fires of nostalgia get stoked because people just want to feel something like they felt when they were younger. That they were inspired to, wow, the world's a big, beautiful, crazy, funny, insane, scary place, and that made me feel something about it. And we were talking about we always take ourselves so seriously and our music so seriously. When's the last? Think about something from when we were younger that was fun. Imagine we could do something really cool that would be fun.
Silly and fun,
involve music. We could be clever. We could show off a bit. We could even plop in some messages too, but it would just be so fun. What would you want to do? And we're jib-jabbering back and forth, and then pretty much really, I think you dropped it. You said it, and I was like, and I think you were doing it almost jokingly, like, oh, that would be kind of cool. And I was like, wait a minute, that's something. So.
There's something there.
So what did you say?
I said Big Trouble in Little China, the musical.
Big Trouble in Little China, the musical. And if you are a fan of this podcast, I've dropped teases about it for quite some time. And I sat there slack-jawed for a minute, and all of a sudden my brain is electrified, and I imagined this experience that would be like rock opera with huge cinema screens kind of angled or stretched over the stage.
Cinematic rock opera.
Cinematic motion comic. Yeah, cinematic rock opera. But it would also be this live experience of arriving at the venue and feeling like you were in Little China.
Experiential.
Yeah, exactly. It would feel like you were you were watching a movie, you were at a rock concert, you were having the musical, the Broadway-esque experience. And then you'd have the built-in nostalgia of not only a property that you knew that was being looked at through a different lens and making some clever commentary on today's experience, but it would still be very much an 80s property, and the music would be directly inspired by or parodies of hits from the era, from the film. So what we're going to leave you with today, and hopefully give you a little bit of the feeling that we got from it, because we had a fun time collaborating together, and I can't wait till our next one. And maybe it'll be a film based on your Owl Cave Dream stuff. Maybe it'll be more. Maybe it'll be more stuff, more podcasts with the Stillness, the new Stillness work. But hopefully, and we're working on it slowly but surely. We just need money, like everybody needs money. But we're thinking of putting together something with this project, and we have, we have 7 or 8 pieces, I think, kind of
maybe 10, including the little guys.
Yeah, more. Yeah, exactly, more than hacked together. But we're going to leave you with a little medley, a little chunk, a sample of the stuff we have put together. Bonus points for anyone in the comment section or in my DMs or on Twitter or on Instagram or wherever you're listening to this, YouTube, what have you, who can name all the songs that we kind of did an homage to, parodied, what have you. But yeah, so we got to start with Stillness and this amazing jazz. We got to move into the psychedelic ambient space of Owl Cave, and we're going to end off with some 80s rock and pop, and to show that this is the thing. Don't limit yourself. Risk failure.
Dare to suck.
And reach out to different people who you respect to work with, because it will bring out the best in all of you. And so we want to take that moment to say we hope that inspires you. We hope the music inspires you. Please go visit TobiasTinker.com, come to BrookeBurgess.com. But more importantly than consuming our stuff, end of a decade, Happy New Year, go forward with some courage. Know that, yeah, it's not easy, and yeah, the world might seem like a mad place on the verge of collapse, but that's what us Gen X folks are for. We're there to sit there right behind you, cheer you on, raise the lighters in the air, and enjoy the show, and remind you it is just a show. We're just here trying to make the soundtrack for it. Take care. Love you lots. Happy New Year to come.
Happy New Year.
Can anybody find him somebody to hear me chain die? Mountain or Gracie Law, the time is now. Give it to me, bring me revelation, release to me everything that you are. You are the key out of my damnation. I beg you, please take the burning blade, tame the savage heart.
Who the hell is Dave Lopan? Saw the sky become green fire and three bad dudes singing like a choir. Were they flying or on wires? Then the crazy shit transpired. Crazy! What do you want? What do you want? Who's this Dave Lopan? Seriously, guys, where the hell is Dave Lopan? Tell me! David Lopan! David Lopan! He's a demon! He's a demon! Not just a bad guy! A really bad guy! A really demon! Lopan's a demon!
Seriously, Egg Shen? I mean, what the fuck? Your savior's just an asshole with a mullet and a Mack truck. I get desperation when you run low in cash, but you could have done better than calling 1-800-white trash. You're a self-hating Oriental. Yeah, I dropped the real bomb. You're just a yes sir, ching chong, egg roll, Uncle Tom, and you're still going on about your 6-demon bag. Bitch, that's what your mom calls my junk when we shag.
My baby's got green eyes, 2,000 years of tries to satisfy Cheng Dai. It makes me wanna cry. I got 2 girls with green eyes, but who will tame the burning blade? Who will tame the burning blade?
This is a man's world, and we are all just prisoners of his greed. We are tired of it, we are done with this shit. Another man is the last thing we need, the last thing I need. But I wonder what of anything remains if I close off my heart and break free of these chains. I am living in a man's world, so I fight for all of womankind. But sometimes in the dark, other things come to mind.
I thought we were friends, Wang. Races aside, but I've got your money and you got your pride. So take your best shot with the bottle I choose. Swing for the fences, you're still gonna lose. Oh yeah. 'Cause it's all, believe me, Jack. 'Cause it's all, I'm gonna do it, Jack. 'Cause it's all, 'cause it's all, 'cause it's all, I'm gonna do it, Jack. 'Cause it's all. Mind and body is one in the reflexes, yin and yang, 'cause it's all. My spirit is ready in the ring, and the flesh will follow. Flexes, yeah. the truth is evident. If we're not back by dawn, call the president.